kind of go.
Oh, great, fantastic. Well, bonjour and good afternoon, everyone. Namaste from India. Very excited to be here. Thank you, Bertrand, for the opportunity to connect with and speak to the Belbin community in France. And what are we going to be doing today? We're going to be looking, of course, at Belbin, but we're going to be looking at how can we build emotional intelligence with the Belbin team roles. Yeah. And therefore, the webinar content is going to have, of course, the Belbin team roles. And we're going to be looking at the Daniel Goleman emotional intelligence framework. We will really look at emotions and behavior. And if you're going to be looking at emotions, it's very important for us to really understand the operating system that we are all running on, yeah, which is really our brain. And we do like this concept of the triune brain. So we're going to focus on that. And then hopefully through the entire webinar, we're going to be really looking at what are concrete exercises, action points that we can use from our Belbin reports to really enhance our emotional intelligence. So this webinar is going to look at Belbin, emotional intelligence, and also understanding emotions and behavior, and how do we really link these three to really enhance our individual effectiveness. Yeah, I'm hoping this is sounding interesting enough. Okay, and then we will dive in. If there are any queries, questions, of course, hoping this will also be a conversation towards the end. Okay, when Bertrand invited me to be part of Cafe Belbin today, and I was thinking of what all needs to be put together, I thought it was really interesting that I would be speaking in English, and what I am speaking is getting translated into French also as I speak. But interestingly, the content that actually brings us all together is really the language of behavior. And that's what the Belbin team roles gives us. Belbin really gives us the language to talk about behavior. And Belbin says that there are certain clusters of behavior, and if these clusters of behavior are present within the team, that's when a team is successful. And therefore, some of these clusters are, and this is the first category which I'm taking over here, which is the thinking role. So there are certain behaviors that really talk about being creative, the ability to solve difficult problems, and that's called the plant. The team role of the specialist, being able to go really deep in possibly a narrow area. The team role of the monitor evaluator, the ability to weigh options strategically, the ability to be impartial. And then you also have the action-oriented roles, the ability to really overcome obstacles, which is the shaper. An implementer, planning personified, to be able to translate ideas into reality. That's what the implementer brings onto the table. Complete a finisher, really polishing and perfecting, looking at raising the bar. And then you have the social category, the resource investigator, fantastic at building connects and network. Team worker, the ability to be sensitive to the needs of others. And the coordinator, being able to clarify the goal, being able to spot talent, be able to delegate effectively. And Belbin says, all of us have access to all of these team roles. Yeah, you would have found at different points of time, we've kind of made these contributions. But the Belbin philosophy says that all of us have about 3 roles that are known as our preferred roles. And these are the roles that we play really well. We make a positive impact when we play these roles. All of us have 3 roles that are known as our manageable roles. And the manageable roles is very interesting because this is what we call our area of versatility. When we play these roles, we may realize that it may be stressful, but you still do a pretty good job at it. Yeah, that's our manageable roles. And then we all have about 3 roles that are our least preferred roles. And Belbin says, as much as we try, in fact, we're not going to probably be very good at playing our least preferred roles. But the interesting thing is, Belbin says our least preferred roles is what we should actually celebrate. And why should we celebrate it? We should celebrate it because what I am not good at, in all probability, there will be someone else in my team who will have my least preferred roles as their preferred or manageable roles. And therefore, my least preferred roles is really my area of collaboration, my area to really reach out. So when Belbin talks about enhancing effectiveness, we actually say, identify your top roles, that's your area of mastery. Identify your manageable roles, that's your area of versatility or stretch. And your least preferred roles is your area of collaboration. Yeah. So that's about the Belbin team roles. We're going to add one more layer in terms of a framework, and we're going to be looking at Daniel Goleman's EI framework. Okay, and Daniel Goleman says that when it comes to emotional intelligence, we actually have these 5 competencies: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. These are the elements that make up really emotional intelligence. And in order to kind of deep dive a little into this, we're going to be using Mentimeter. So here's where I'm going to switch screens. If you've already got onto Mentimeter, then take on your phone, or if you're on the laptop, then you can also go to the Mentimeter screen. If you're using your phone, stay over here because you'll be able to see my screen and you'll have to put in your answers on your phone in the Mentimeter app. So just give me a minute while I switch screens.
Alors, je vous rappelle, pour ceux qui sont arrivés un peu en retard et qui ne seraient pas fluent in English, que je mets la traduction en français de la question qui vous sera posée en anglais sur Mentimeter au fur et à mesure où elles arriveront. Donc, j'essaie d'être aussi rapide que possible, mais je ne suis pas encore un héros de BD, donc n'hésitez pas à râler.
Okay, everyone's ready? So I'm going to hit the enter button over here. And what's going to happen is you're going to see a question. You see the question also on the screen on which you're playing Mentimeter. Yeah? Okay. The faster you answer, the more points you get. Okay, first one. Which emotional intelligence element refers to a deep understanding of one's emotions, strengths, weaknesses, needs, and drives, and its impact? Which of these elements do you think refers to a deep understanding of emotions, strengths, weaknesses? Okay, fantastic. We've got the answer over here. The correct answer is self-awareness. Yeah. So a deep understanding of my own emotions, my strength, my weaknesses, my needs, and what is the impact of this on others is referred to as self-awareness. We're going to dig in a little deeper in a bit. Let's look at the leaderboard. Okay, in top position, we have Geraldine, followed by Olivia.
Merveilleux, Olivia et Géraldine, bravo.
Okay, everyone, the faster you answer, the more points you get. Get ready for the next question. An ongoing inner conversation that frees us from being prisoners of our feelings. An inner conversation that frees us from being prisoners of our feelings. What could this be? Fantastic. Yes, this is self-regulation. Self-regulation is our ability to really manage our emotions, and that requires us to have this inner conversation. Let's look at the leaderboard. Do we see a change? No change as yet. Okay, so we still have Geraldine in the lead. Next question. A deeply embedded desire to achieve for the sake of achievement. Which element do you think this is? The desire to achieve for the sake of achievement. Five seconds more. And fantastic. Yes, a deeply embedded desire to achieve for the sake of achievement is what we call motivation. Let's look at the leaderboard. Now, the faster you answer, the more points you get. So we're going to have to check and see if there's been, my gosh, absolutely no change in the leaderboard. I have to say that I think everyone is really is hitting it as fast as possible. Okay, so we've got Geraldine, followed by Olivia, LB, and then Eleanor. Eleanor, by the way, was the fastest in this round. Okay, next question. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the second last question. Okay, you only have 2 more opportunities to really go up the leaderboard. The next question is, thoughtfully considering others' feelings along with other factors in the process of making intelligent decisions, what would this be? Thoughtfully considering others' feelings along with other factors. 4 seconds. And this is empathy. Yeah, considering others' feelings is an important part of is empathy. And let's see what the leaderboard looks like right now. Ooh, few changes over here. However, Geraldine and Olivia are still leading. Okay, everyone, your last chance. This is the last question for Mentimeter for today. And the question is, the ability to connect and influence. The ability to connect and influence. Which one would this be? Fantastic. Yes, everyone got this right. The ability to connect and influence would be social skills. We're going to go a little deeper into all of these elements. But before that, let's take a final look at the leaderboard and see who is leading. So in first place, a round of applause for Geraldine. Did not leave that first spot at all. Followed by Olivia, fantastic, and Eleanor. Very, very well done. Yeah.
Bravo Géraldine. Je me demande si tu t'es pas entraînée toute la semaine pour être aussi rapide sur les réponses. On t'entend pas si tu fais un commentaire. Ok, peur.
Thanks, Bertrand. So when we look at the different elements of emotional intelligence, self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, these are actually what we call personal competencies. And empathy and social skills are what are called social competencies. Self-awareness, self-regulation, and motivation really has to do with me, myself, work that I do within. And empathy and social skills necessarily requires the environment, requires me to be with others in order to also, in a way, demonstrate them. Let's do our deep dive, and I'm going to switch to my presentation. You should be able to see my presentation right now. Okay, so self-awareness, as we said, is a deep understanding of my own emotions, my strengths, my weaknesses, and very importantly, my needs, my drives, and the impact on others. Now, when I have a strong sense of self-awareness, it really means I'm able to assess myself realistically. I am comfortable knowing my weaknesses. And in fact, I want to know how can I really better myself. I find work energizing. How do we get all of these elements and how can Belbin help us over here? We spoke about how Belbin says that we have our preferred, our manageable, and our least preferred roles. So if you have your Belbin report, it would be interesting to actually look at the page that says team role feedback. Now, Belbin says that with our preferred roles, this is our area of mastery. This is our strength. And Belbin says, this is the area that you should really fly and build your career to maximize these strengths. So my top roles are TW, SP, PL. This becomes my area of mastery. And for me to be really aware of it, these are my strengths. Manageable roles. Belbin says this is our area of versatility and stretch, which means being aware I may find these roles slightly stressful. but I can do a pretty good job of it. Even that awareness becomes really important in terms of how do I actually manage my manageable roles, my being ready to step up if no one else has those roles, me being patient with myself when I'm playing these roles, to realize that these are not my top roles, but I may sometimes take a little more time to play these roles. And finally, our least preferred roles. This is what we would normally say our weakness, something that we are not good at. But that becomes my area of collaboration, my area to reach out. So, knowing what my least preferred roles are and putting them down over there. So, in terms of self awareness, Belbin actually helps us be very conscious of what's my area of mastery, what's my area of versatility, and what's my area of collaboration. And when we look at our team roles from these lenses, it kind of helps us gain confidence to say, this is what I'm not good at. But hey, these are the areas that I'm also really good at. Yeah. So that's with self awareness. Let's take a look at self regulation. And we said self regulation is really the ability to control and redirect disruptive impulses and moods. If we've got to look at self regulation, an important part of self regulation is definitely going to be really understanding and looking at emotions. But in order to do that, let's take a look at this concept of the triune brain. Now, it is said that if you look at evolution and the way we came to be and the evolution of the brain, what really first was formed is what is known as the reptilian brain, which is really the part surrounding the spinal cord. And this is the area that's really known for sustenance, for safety. So, stuff like breathing, the fact that I'm feeling hungry. So, just making sure that survival is happening is something that's taken care of by the reptilian brain. As we evolved as a species, the next bit of the brain that developed was what is known as the emotional brain. Now, the emotional brain is really the seat of all of our emotions because the brain started growing outward. And the emotional brain is really what houses our values, our beliefs. And this is where emotions get triggered. And as we evolved further, the brain developed further, and then we have what is today known as the neocortex or the executive brain. This is where all of the logical thinking is happening. This is where our thoughts are formed. Now, with brain imaging and the latest technology that there is today, we've been able to identify that there is a lot of activity that's happening in the emotional brain. Check this out. In the emotional brain, we have about 6 billion nerve cells that are firing every second. So there's a lot happening in the emotional brain, as compared to only about 100 neuronal stimulations in the logical brain. Not only that, the emotional brain sends out signals to the logical brain and is able to send out signals to the different parts of our body. So it's a pretty strong road that has been developed. However, in comparison, there is a connection from the logical brain to the emotional brain also. But that's something that's not as strong as compared to the emotional brain. Let's take a look at an example to explain this. And I love this example of looking at the lion and the lion tamer. If you look at the lion and the lion tamer, who has more physical strength? Who would you say is stronger? The lion or the lion tamer? Who has more physical strength?
The lion.
The lion, yeah. The lion has more physical strength any day. However, in the relationship between the lion and the lion tamer, who is the one who exerts more influence?
The tamer.
The lion tamer. In the relationship between the lion and the lion tamer, the lion is the one that is much stronger. That's our emotional brain. Extremely strong. The billions of cells that are firing per second. But the lion tamer is the one that exerts influence on the lion. That's our emotional brain. Oh, sorry, that's our logical brain. And in emotional intelligence, what we're really saying is, how do we build this relationship between the lion and the lion tamer, between the emotional brain and the neocortex or the executive brain? You know, very interestingly, they say that there is a friendship that the lion tamer has to first build with the lion. The lion tamer knows the lion. The lion tamer calls the lion by name, and the lion knows the lion tamer. In the same way, we need to build this relationship with our emotional brain. We need to get to know the emotional brain. We need to kind of call it by name. So, an important part in emotional intelligence is really going to be working with the neocortex to be able to build the relationship with the emotional brain. How do we do that? Okay. One of the first steps is, in fact, an exercise that's called Name It to Tame It. The lion tamer calls the lion by name. And it is said that if we are able to name our emotion, when we name it, we've already begun to tame our emotion. And therefore, the next time you feel a feeling, to be able to actually sit down and say, what is this feeling? And not simply, I am upset. Upset can be used for different emotions. Yeah. But I'm feeling aggravated. I am feeling slighted. I am feeling angry. I am feeling disappointed, doubtful. There is a richness in the language of feelings. And there is a list of feeling words that is available. In fact, there is something called the Wheel of Feels, which is available online. And they say the next time you have a strong emotion, go through that entire list, read every word. And when you find the word that you are feeling, I can guarantee you this will happen. You will stop and you say, that's it. That's what I'm feeling. And when you're able to name it, automatically that emotion starts actually getting tamed, because they say that if we are able to name something, the brain already realizes, I know what this is, I know how to handle it, and the process of dealing with the emotion starts. Now, one is name it to tame it, but another very important part also about emotions for us to understand is that when we have unmet needs, and that's really when we experience negative emotions, when we have unmet needs, you'll realize that it actually drains us. Think of the time when you have been sad. Think of the time when you have felt lonely. Think of the time when you felt angry. What you'll realize is when we experience these emotions, it actually drains us. There's really no energy to do anything else. But we are feeling those negative emotions because we have needs that are not met. They say emotions are our friends. Negative emotions are just telling us that, hey, you have a need that is not met. And positive emotions are telling us that you have a need that has been met. And when we experience positive emotions, you'll realize that we experience generative energy. Yeah. When we are happy, we seem to have more energy to do more things. When someone compliments us, or if we've done something really well, when we're experiencing a positive emotion, we experience generative energy to do more things. And therefore, sometimes we tell our children, don't be angry. The thing is, we can't say don't be angry, because the feeling will just come. And the feeling is basically telling us whether a need is met or a need is not met. How can Belbin now help us then with self-regulation? Yeah, this whole aspect of our behavior and our needs and our emotion, how is it all related? There's a beautiful report in the Belbin team role report, which is your list of observer words. And you'll realize that in this report, you also have what is known as an italic word. So one way is to look at your top italic word, just that first italic word, wherever it may be in your report. For me, my top italic word is fearful of conflict. So you actually write that down and think about the last 2 to 3 weeks when may have been an incident where you may have come across as being fearful of conflict. Okay, so you've got to think of that. You have to go back and try to think of the last 2 to 3 weeks when may have been an incident where I would have come across as fearful of conflict. And then you take out a book, you take out a journal, and you take your pen. Okay. And then you start really putting down what we call the 7 steps to self-regulation. What are these? Okay. So stay with me while I walk through these 7 steps. First of all, you actually write down what was the situation when you would have been seen, in my case, fearful of conflict. So I may have come across as fearful of conflict in a meeting where I expressed a point of view that didn't go too well with a colleague. I sensed she was upset, and immediately I found myself trying to placate and, trying to soothe her hurt feelings. So immediately I kind of tried to revert. Second question, what was the impact of my behavior on the team? Now remember, Belbin talks about behavior. Because I was fearful of conflict, how did that impact my team? As a leader, it's very important for me to know what is the impact on my team. And this is for me to reflect what happened in that situation. Basically, what happened was we did not get to the bottom of the issue, and we didn't get the best decision on the table. Other team members were also present at the meeting, and it may have given the message that differing points of view should be toned down. That was the impact of my behavior. Now, for me to name the feeling, what was it that I was feeling? What was I feeling in that situation? So we've looked at the behavior, but that behavior stems from something. So what was that feeling? The feeling was worry. I felt worry. I felt fear of hurting the relationship. If that was my feeling, what were my thoughts? That means what was happening in my mind? What was I thinking? And here you just start writing whatever you're thinking in your mind. And it's important to write this exercise. So I was thinking, was I too blunt? She seems to be upset. Is she miffed? I really need to make her realize I don't have anything against her. I want our relationship to be okay. So maybe this is what I was thinking. And when you write this down, you will begin to realize what your unmet need is. And this is where you come to the crux of the situation. What was my unmet need? I need to feel accepted. I don't want to be rejected. This is where this whole thing is really stemming from. And now you say, okay, how can I logically relook the situation? So this is now where your logical brain is really going to start exerting influence. How can I relook the situation? Just because I have a different point of view does not mean that I will be rejected. In fact, as a leader, it is my job and duty that I question and table any reservations that I may have. And finally, now, what do I now want to do? What is my new action? How do I want to manage this behavior? And my new action after this could be the next time when I speak or express a differing point of view, I'll back up my view with some fact-based evidence. This will be an objective expression of the view. It will give me confidence to speak and is less likely to be taken personally. When you complete these 7 steps, you would also realize that you kind of feel calmer and there's greater clarity in what to do next. Yeah. So this is the 7 steps of self-regulation. Okay. Going to move on to the next bit. Bertrand, I just want to check with you. May I move on to the next slide? All okay? Yeah? Okay, great. Fantastic. We're going to go to the next element, which is motivation. And motivation is really this embedded desire to achieve for the sake of achievement. Yeah, where you just enjoy what you are doing. And on your own, you want to raise the performance bar. You kind of want to start tracking your progress. And then you start being optimistic even when things are not going too well. How can we nurture this motivation, or how can we kind of ignite it in ourselves, in leaders that we work with, and how can Belbin help us? And this is where we can take this brilliant report. We absolutely love this report in the Belbin deck, which is called Suggested Work Styles. The Suggested Work Styles takes your top team roles, combines them, and says, what is really your authentic leadership style? Or what is it that you bring onto the table that you do really well? So how can you strengthen motivation? So think of this month, the month of December, and actually think of what are your deliverables for this month. So from a job perspective, what are your top deliverables? And maybe one of my deliverables is building relationships with the other departments. So building relations with the other departments, cross-functional working. And then what you do is you choose a work style that you would really like to leverage more in this context. So I maybe would like to choose listening. What is listening? Listening is my strength lies in building better communication with others. Now I'm going to use this lens of my work style to look at my deliverable for the month. How can I leverage the strength of mine to get better at this bit? So TWRI listening. How will you really leverage this? So I enjoy meeting and connecting with people. I will reach out to one new counterpart or stakeholder at least once a month to engage in a conversation, share insights, and learn from each other. I will do this by making a call just to say hello or blocking time to have coffee together once a month with a counterpart. We have tried this with work deliverables that you're not excited about, say something that you have actually been procrastinating. And if you choose one of these, because these are one of your strengths, you begin looking at that task in a completely different light. And we found this to be very helpful. Okay, empathy. Understanding the emotional makeup of another person. It's almost like getting inside the head of the other person to try and figure out what is the person going through. How can Belbin help us over here? You know, with each of the 9 team roles, Belbin actually helps us identify every team role has a need. For example, PL, the plant, the need is to come up with solutions. The need is to develop ideas. Specialist, the need is to deepen knowledge, to leverage the same, the need to undertake research. The resource investigator, the need to communicate. Now, interestingly, if individuals who have these team roles as their top roles do not have this need met, that's when they are not going to be very engaged. That's when they are going to be disengaged. That's when they are going to experience negative feelings. Yeah. So if we are able to look at the team roles, and when we know the need of each team role, we actually then develop empathy to say, okay, what is it that I can do to help my team member meet this particular need? And there is a fantastic handout called Dealing with Different People. Bertrand will definitely have a copy of it, which actually says what are things I should do and not do when I'm working with people who have the different team roles as their top role. So for example, Anush's top role is, say, an implementer. So what is something that I will do and will not do? I will be conscious that I have to explain things to him in a step-by-step manner, and hence I will not get impatient with him. This is actually being empathetic towards what is that person's style of working. Yeah, so that's empathy and using Belbin team roles to develop empathy. And finally, social skills, which is the ability to influence. Social skills really comes from the belief and the assumption that nothing important gets done alone. That's it's only when you believe this that you will really be able to develop our social skills. And how does Belbin help over here? So number one is Belvin actually tells us what is our 9th role. So if we can identify our least preferred role, my least preferred role is the monitor evaluator. In your current work scenario, where do I need this contribution? Who from your team or unit could possibly collaborate with you to compensate for your least preferred role? And over here, I need the monitor evaluator team role when I have to arrive at pricing or overall strategy for a new product. And James from my team has a knack of looking at things from all angles. I will put my plan in place and then request him for a meeting to get his perspective. With the Belvin team roles and with understanding our least preferred role, we see opportunity to build our social skill in terms of collaborating with someone who actually has a strength that could help us and that could help us manage our weakness. Another way that Belvin could help us is actually identifying from your team members at work, what are new insights that you can leverage to leverage your team members' contribution? So, for example, in the team report, you actually have a page that gives you the names of all of the team members and what are their team role contributions. So, you could actually put down the names of people. What is the top team role that you have seen in them? And how can you best leverage this top role? So, for example, Ankit is a resource investigator. He's able to strike a chord with stakeholders really well. He builds client relationship. And therefore, I will make him a part of negotiations when we have to close on PE purchases, for example. Yeah. So again, Belvin kind of helping you to look at what is my least preferred, how can I collaborate with someone else. Secondly, looking at my entire team, looking at what are the top roles of my team members, and then allocating work accordingly. With that, we've actually looked at Daniel Goleman's EI framework, the 5 different elements, and really in terms of how Belvin can help. So self-awareness, looking at our preferred, manageable, and least preferred. We looked at the 7 steps to self-regulation. We looked at how Belvin can help with motivation. We've looked at how Belvin can help us identify the needs of people and therefore build empathy. And finally, how Belvin can help with building social skills. Yeah. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation and happy to address any queries, happy to listen in to any comments that you may have. Bertrand, over to you.
Many, many thanks, Pearl. It's as usual, it was brilliant. Est-ce que vous avez des questions? Profitons-en, on a un peu plus de 10 minutes pour échanger avec Pearl. N'hésitez pas, vous avez vu, elle est adorable et elle ne mord pas. I was just kidding, Pearl. Quelqu'un veut prendre la parole? Allô, allô, allô?
I think Eleanor has her hand raised.
Yes, Eleanor. Mais...
Yes. Thank you very much, Pearl. First of all, really thank you. And I was wondering, for how many years have you practiced and experienced this approach, meaning adding the Goleman's work to the Belvin knowledge and expertise in your own practice?
Oh, great. Thanks, Eleanor. I think the first time we started looking at it was actually during the lockdown. So it was during the lockdown when we were looking at something called resonant leadership for one of our clients. So this would have been from probably from the year 2021, when we started looking at elements of emotional intelligence and realizing that Belvin could actually help with this. This entire framework this is really, I think now since 21, the work that we've done. And most recently, this is us tying it all together. So yeah, I think this is work on for about 3 or 4 years, looking at it from this framework and this lens. Yeah. About 3 years, 3 to 4 years possibly now, of marrying the 2 frameworks together. And most recently, in fact, now also taking it with one of our clients. And I think the impact is, they're kind of finding it easy to use both the tools together. Yeah. So to answer your question, about 3 to 4 years, Eleanor.
Thank you very much, Pearl. Thank you.
D'autres questions? N'hésitez pas, ne soyez pas farouches, ça ne dure que 10 minutes. Alors,
You hear me?
quelqu'un veut
Yes.
prendre la parole?
Yes. You hear me?
Yes, Louisa.
Do you think that your approach can be used in Western market and India at the same time?
Oh, yes, most definitely. And the reason I say this, Louisa, is because I think behavior and emotions is something that all of us experience, all of us are affected by. Even when we look at the Belvin team roles and we look at Belvin in different markets, we've realized that the 9 team roles are found everywhere. When you look at emotions, you see it everywhere. And I think the fact that we experience positive emotions when our needs are met. We experience negative emotions when our needs are not met. And I think this is something that is true. That's across. So I think wherever we've got human beings, yes, it's something that would resonate, that would work. Yeah.
Super, merci beaucoup, Louisa. Une autre question, Louisa ou quelqu'un d'autre? N'hésitez pas. Je vous vois opiner du chef ou vous coupez vos caméras. N'hésitez pas à poser des questions, on peut les traduire, même si vous vous sentez pas
Could
suffisant.
I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah, would that be okay? Yeah.
Yes, vas-y.
Actually, Louisa, I'm quite intrigued by your question. Do you see any areas or challenge of using this in, like, say, the in your market as compared to the Indian market? Just because I think it's an interesting question.
Alors, pendant que Louisa est en train de faire une petite randonnée dans son open space, juste pour préciser, en fait, Louisa travaille entre l'Europe et l'Inde. I was just explaining what is the main work,
Yes,
and
sorry.
she's investor, and she's a cross-border
Yes.
investor between
Okay.
between France, principally.
Yes, I'm so sorry, but just to say to you, I am editing a note on how invest in India, and I am in the bibliothèque, in the library of the Musée Guimet. No, this is why I was unable to to respond. Yeah. Yes, Bert. My question is, I think that we can leverage this approach in all geographies, but to work in this corridor India-Europe, I think that there is some peculiarities that, something can provoke positive emotions to Indians and negative to Europeans.
Yes.
Because and some positive emotions for Indians are negative. So, but I agree with you that the reactivity to that is the same.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Huh? Yes. And I think that's spot on, Louisa. So basically, the trigger, or what triggers the positive emotion, what triggers the negative emotion. Yes, that could have cultural influences. Very true.
Yes. And it's I said slow down, because this is, you have the root of Ashoka behind me.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes, you see it. Yeah. Yes, there is different perceptions.
Yes.
Of situations.
Yes.
From a European standpoint rather than an Indian, and this is absolutely could provoke also difficulties in the dialogue.
Yeah.
In the teams, and also analyzing the perspective, in my case, of a company of a business model, understanding a lot of things in that sense. Yeah.
No, very true, Louisa. And I think that's why all the more, since we are, it's already a reality that there will be
Yes.
cross-cultural teams. And the
Yes.
more cross-cultural teams we have, I think
Yes.
more the need for us as leaders to respond and not react.
Yeah.
And that's an important part of emotional intelligence. That is actually getting the neocortex to really influence
Yeah.
rather
True.
than the lion. Yeah. Getting more powerful. So yes, that's one. And the second thing, Louisa, which I think is a huge value add that Belbin allows, is the language of behavior. And I've seen this working with cross-cultural teams, where Belbin actually helps move beyond, number one, cultural stereotypes. That's number one. But secondly, also gives the language of behavior to really talk about what do we need, what is it, what contributions that we need to bring onto the table. And I think that common language is something that really helps cross-cultural teams also.
Yes, sure.
Merci.
Sure. Yes.
Merci, Louisa. Please, Eleanor, tu voulais poser une question? Eleanor?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
I just wanted to add, because I totally agree with Pearl and her approach. I've been used as a go-between during negotiations between French and Japanese. And even if the cultural approach is important, yet as human, we just have behaviors, and our behaviors are common. They might be triggered by different emotions and reactions to different contexts, yet our behavior is commonly the one of the humankind compared to the animal or the animal realm. So I think that's the beauty of the Belbin approach, is that we don't work on the cultural, we consider it, but we don't work only on the cultural approach. We work on the behavior. And that's really the basis we all have in common.
Brilliant. Yes, agree. And something that we really need, I think we really need to also see similarity today and celebrate differences and see similarity. Yeah.
Of course. I think it's also one of the main nuggets of Belbin.
Yeah.
Est-ce que quelqu'un a d'autres questions en tête, d'autres envies, même s'il nous reste 3 minutes par rapport à la fin du café. Le café sera froid dans 3 minutes, sachez-le, mes amis. Non? Oui, Maryse.
Just a word to thanks a lot, because it's ring me a bell on the approach to have with my the team I just dealing with. So thank you very much. And the behavior approach is very important for me, and that true that you can overall either of the culture. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Maryse. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Maryse. D'autres choses? Est-ce que ceux qui sont encore vivants parmi nous ont envie de partager quelque chose? Non? So many thanks, Pearl. It was
Thank you.
Again and again, it was brilliant, and it was so generous. So many thanks. We will deal with the recording for all the people who are there and who cannot attend it. Donc vous aurez tous l'enregistrement de la vidéo de ce qu'on a partagé. Donc ne soyez pas inquiet par rapport à ça, on vous l'enverra. Je voulais vous remercier d'être. On a plein de nouvelles têtes aujourd'hui, et pas nécessairement des gens qui sont certifiés, et ça fait partie, à mon avis, de ce qui est chouette, c'est qu'on ouvre un petit peu plus grand la maison Belbin. Donc vous êtes tous bienvenus quand vous voulez dans nos cafés Belbin, qui ne sont pas tous les jours aussi brillants qu'avec Pearl, mais presque. Thank you very much, Pearl. Thank you. Merci à vous tous. À très bientôt.
Thank you.
Au revoir.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Have a good day ahead.